Hello again, and welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And once again, we're pre-taping. This time it's a Thursday before our Monday air, and this is brought to you by the good graces of Manhattan Neighborhood Network and EVT Educational Productions, Inc.
Yes.
Bob, once more into the breach.
Yes.
We'll take a quick survey overview and see what might still be percolating on Monday.
I mean, lucky for us, we have no shortage of items to look at.
But you've got a great media journalist story that I think we should lead the show.
All right. New York is unfortunately the site of a lot of these really gruesome murders, and this one was particularly stomach-churning.
Yes.
In terms of the use of the axe and the fact that it was multiple injuries. One person hacked to death, the other one pretty badly injured with an axe and apparently a knife and other things.
Two females, one boyfriend or the perpetrator.
Right. And they knew each other, the three of them, and so it was particularly nasty. And, of course, police were hunting right away for the suspect, trying to find out what happened.
Who did this heinous crime?
But and of course, all of the media, the newspapers covered it. But it was a very young, very intrepid digital producer and assignment editor for Pix 11, Channel 11, who actually went a couple steps further and actually assisted the police in locating the suspect and encouraged the suspect to turn himself in.
Now, she wasn't trying to assist the police; she was just doing her job.
Yes, just doing her, yes. And I'm kind of proud of her because since she wasn't my student, but it's part of what I used to teach in computer-assisted reporting and using the resources available to you to flesh out a story.
Yeah.
And she says when the story came up, she used Facebook and she got the name of the boyfriend. It was in police reports and hadn't been made public yet.
Police reports that they picked up either through a contact or a scanner.
Right.
They got the suspect's
through their
name.
Police sources, got the suspect's name, went on Facebook and used the Facebook page of one of the woman who had gotten injured but not killed, and found this person on her Facebook page under a unique identity. And she, first of all, let me give you her name, Ava Pittman, a Pix 11 digital producer and assignment editor. And she said I didn't approach and she actually, through Facebook, managed to get a message through to the person, to the alleged.
She messaged the suspect via Facebook.
And said, "Can you give me a call?" And much to her surprise, he did call back, and they had a conversation. And he basically, she said he was crying, he was biting his lip, and he was obviously didn't know what he should do. And I'll just pull out one quote. "I didn't approach the conversation as if I was talking to a murderer," Ava Pittman, a Pix 11 digital producer and assignment editor, said Sunday. "I just wanted to know what went on inside that apartment 8J. And through talking with him, through convincing him that it was time to step forward and talk to the police, because that basically was the only thing to do at that point, she got the suspect, Jerry Brown, to turn himself in to the police. And one of the higher-up police officials, Captain Terrence Monahan, Chief Terrence Monahan, the chief of department, not the commissioner of the NYPD, said, "Thank you, Ava Pittman and Pix 11 News, for helping us bring justice to the victims of this horrendous crime and sharing in the responsibility and keeping our great city safe." So it made me feel good to see a young reporter do due diligence with her skills and reporting and doing more than a lot of veteran reporters did on that story. So I have to give my props.
Yeah, she actually had some initiative, took the bull by the horns, as they say, and said, "What's the victim's name?
Yeah.
Is she on Facebook? Oh, boom, there she is." I love the way she tracked that down using the available resources at her disposal. And more young reporters need to be able to think on their feet like that.
Exactly. Just take that extra step, figure out where that person might be on social media, and you might end up having to get up out of your desk and finding the house or making that call, but doing the extra work and she did it and got a good story out of it.
Oh, heck
And
yeah.
and got the suspect to bring himself
Got
in.
the guy to turn himself in. That's major props for job well done and good outcome.
And we don't get an opportunity to do that often enough on Media Watch.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're called Media Watch, folks, because we like to keep an eye out on what's good and bad.
Yes.
And usually we're talking about the bad.
Yes.
To
On the slip-ups, yes.
To segue to the bad.
Yes.
And actually, that was a heinous crime because he basically murdered that female with an axe.
Yes.
And so it was a horrendous piece of work, which probably why he was as distraught as he was and didn't know what to do with himself.
And a less skilled person on the phone jumps right away and might have gotten the guy to hang up the phone.
Yeah.
But she just
she got him to open up and to talk, to continue talking, which is great. Well, speaking of heinous and outrageous things, the other outrageous story, of course, is 359 now dead, and a count of over close to 500 injured in
Yes.
the Easter Sunday, last Easter Sunday, last Sunday a week ago when we were airing.
yes, 8 days back. Yes.
Yeah, it's the interesting thing about that is that the Muslim population in Sri Lanka is about 10%.
Right.
The Christian population is about 9%.
Right. It's
And
close, but not even that.
They are two minorities among other minorities in a mostly Buddhist country.
Yes.
Okay? And so for terrorists of one religious sect to attack 3 Christian churches and upscale hotels where probably Westerners, probably maybe Christians in name,
Right.
would be staying, that's caused all kinds of turmoil in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
The blowback now, I read we're taping on Thursday. I read a Wednesday report that was filed in the New York Times about the fact that Christian mobs were now storming, this week, storming Muslim neighborhoods.
Yeah, see now?
And the Muslims had to take shelter with
Yep.
the police and in mosques because they were being beaten. Even children were being beaten by Christian mobs retaliating for the massacre.
And we were having this conversation on the phone about how ignorance builds upon itself in different communities and blows back against each other. And you have this really nasty, unfortunate effect of now going
Yeah.
after the mosque. We're dealing actually with just a tiny, horrific core of extremists.
Small extremists,
Yeah.
really. I mean, the thing that's coming out about these Sri Lankan bombers now, it turns out that one family's been zeroed in on one guy. The father of the 2 of the identified bombers is a billionaire spice king in Sri Lanka. And the father's now under arrest and being questioned because they don't know whether he knew what his sons were doing when
Yes.
they were part of this jihadist group that were, dealing with or allegedly dealing with
Yes.
these bombings. And so the family is now in turmoil. Supposedly, the wife of one of those bombers, one of those sons, blew herself up in a suicide bomb when the cops came to arrest family
Okay.
members.
Is that when
blew
she did
herself
it?
up
Okay.
in front of the house, by the house.
That was the point.
She blew
Okay.
herself up and her children.
Okay, I didn't know it was there. Was that the point where the police were killed?
Yes,
like two
two
or three
cops
officers?
were also killed
Yeah.
when they were about to try to arrest family
Astounding.
members for questioning. And so you've got this ripple effect of more people dying, and who knows where this is going. But we were talking about this whole tit for tat thing. I know I was speculating that because 50 plus Muslims and a bunch of other Muslims, members of the Islamic faith, were killed by this white nationalist crazy in New Zealand.
A few months ago.
Yeah,
Yes.
this may actually just like 3 weeks ago. It seems like months ago because everything
Yeah.
just keeps blowing one
Okay.
after the other. It was like mid-March. Ides of March.
Was it that recent?
Ides of March, 15th of March.
Okay.
I remembered because I was saying Ides of March. Caesar had warning on the Ides of March from a
Okay.
soothsayer. The folks in the mosque had no warning.
No.
So that's 15 March.
And I remember, and geek that I am, always looking for news on Facebook and elsewhere. I didn't realize that he had actually live streamed his assault on the mosque.
Yes.
And as much as I watch online video and want those body cam shots and whatnot, I've yet to watch that video. I don't want to see it. I need to see it.
I didn't call it up. I didn't intend to call it up. I was upset with the Facebook people and YouTube and whoever was streaming it, that the fact that they still couldn't intercept and intercede once they got wind of the fact that it was happening. I mean, they did their best, but they're always after the fact.
But I got upset at the people who kept uploading it. There's a certain level of dignity which you got to have.
Respect for human life.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't care if you want hits on your site. You don't put a video like that up. I didn't need to see that, and that wasn't. But getting back to the current case in Sri Lanka on Easter Sunday. The initial reporting, and Sri Lanka isn't a heavily covered country by the Western press. So there's
not since the Tamil revolt.
Yes.
And they got that peace treaty.
It was that 10 years ago?
Yep.
Yeah.
About 10 years. They finally ended what was a long-ass 10 to 15, 25-year insurrection.
Right. It was a secessionist group that wanted to one island to secede.
They wanted their independence.
Yes. It took. They've had the peace for 10 years, but the initial reporting coming out of Sri Lanka, I was looking for people on the ground, but some of the reports were coming out of London and coming out of Brussels, which told me there was nobody there
initially.
And then we had, Reuters had some locals suddenly appear, and you could tell they didn't have the best of equipment. But they found them and they got them hooked up. And the guy, and I wish I knew his name, who was on the street outside of one of the hotels, he was actually pretty good. And I'm glad that CNN and the others
they use his stuff because he was on the ground, he was on the scene.
Yeah. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in looking at basically people in shirts and ties, we forget that people on the street who can be good journalists. They don't need to be looking like Walter Cronkite.
In the old days, there were a cadre of people like that in local places around the globe. We call them stringers. Back in my newsroom, back in the day when I was running the foreign assignment desk for ABC News. And those stringers, they weren't on the payroll, right? Because it was their neighborhood, and they probably worked for the local newspaper or the local broadcast outlet that never got outside their country, sometimes not outside their city. They were there, and they were fairly competent journalists. Some of them were outstanding journalists. And when stories broke, that stringer network would go into effect. And the bottom line is, when these people cut back on their foreign bureaus and cut back on staffing and manning international news, all that network, I think, went away, which is why when things break, you get nothing for a while until some good citizen with a camera pops up, because the stringers, they aged out like I've aged out.
Yes, but you're correct.
And they didn't keep that system, which is an outstanding system. You can't afford to man every city and every country on the globe. But if you've got a network of people that you can rely on there locally, you can get good stuff. Maybe that stuff will start to come back when they solidify good people who are network or social media savvy, and they can build a similar kind of network. Maybe they built it and I don't know.
Yeah, well,
but what I've been seeing on international coverage, I don't think they have.
Not to the extent as you were just explaining, because in my early days in newspapers, we had the great stringer network, and it was just domestic, but around the state, around the country. So if something broke somewhere, you knew somebody,
that local guy.
Not only could you get him to cover it, he already knew the background. And could
that's his country, his city, his territory.
And he could couch it. I had one case where a local, I was in Milwaukee at the time, as you well know, at the old Milwaukee Sentinel. We had something break in the Middle East, and I knew that one of the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee professors was out there.
Bingo.
But back then, there wasn't cell phones or anything like that. I had to send the man a telex.
Telex, yes.
And somehow he got it in his hands and called the newsroom back, and he had the background
He
and
gave
understood.
you on-the-scene reports.
So superior to, for that moment, to what other people were getting.
Oh, heck yeah.
So it's
nothing like having your man on the scene,
Yeah.
or your man and woman, or woman on the scene.
But unfortunately, in today we have the Twitter sphere where people can just think and tweet without having any background or underlying
and because
premise.
everybody's walking around with a camera in their cell phone, they're sending you terrible video, but
Right.
but it's video. So, but anyway, talking about extremism and extremists, and the way to segue back really is the tit for tat, the
Right.
white supremacist folk that have been inspiring other folk to strike back, whomever. Your former vice president, Mr. Biden.
Yes.
Today is the day that he actually made his announcement that he is going to seek the nomination for president. And I heard and read somewhere where he regretted the fact that he had not thrown his ad in for the 2016 primary campaign.
Right.
And so now he's decided he's going to do his best to get the nomination. And the excerpt that I read was that he quoted the need to try to help recapture the soul of the country once he saw the Charlottesville
Right.
demonstration by the super white nationalists.
Yeah, first the demonstrations with the tiki torches and the racist chants and the
Yes, you will not replace us.
Well,
Jews will not
I was going to
replace
say
us.
anti-Semitic as well. Yes.
And then why Joe Biden and what he quoted for his reason, and backstop me on this, Bob, because you might be able to call it up. He pretty much said when the President of the United States stood up and decided after that young lady lost her life, Heather Heyer,
Yes.
I cannot not call her name because she paid the ultimate price for these racist SOBs to get out there and do their dastardly deeds. Heather Heyer lost her life, and the President of the United States could not condemn white supremacists after she lost her life. And he had the gall to say there were fine people on both sides.
On both sides.
Joe Biden, I think, quoted that.
Yeah, he's setting a tone. He's basically saying that we need to get back to that level of decency where we know what the right thing to do at a moment is, and what not to do and when to shut up and things like that. So yeah, quoting Charlottesville and how
Donald Trump reacted to it. Yeah,
and just to focus on the president for a second. After the announcement, of course, the president has to tweet his response, and like I was just telling you, I'm kind of glad I didn't see it before I came into this room, but it's par for the course for somebody who basically insults everybody along the road. Welcome to the race, Sleepy Joe. I hope you have the intelligence, long in doubt, to wage a successful primary campaign. It will be nasty. You will be dealing with people who, and he's talking about the Democrats now, who truly have some very sick and demented ideas. But if you make it, I will see you at the starting gate. And it sounds so schoolyardish, coming out of the mouth of a president, of a head of state.
No, he's not. Okay, fine. Nominally, he's the head of state, but see,
am I giving him
you're giving him too much.
A compliment by saying it's schoolyardish?
That, and definitely he ain't the head of state as far as I'm concerned, because as far as I'm concerned, and I don't care whether the Mueller report couldn't technically find a conspiracy, there was enough evidence of his people colluding with the Russians. And they colluded in plain sight, and we knew about it, and it's in that investigation, and so it is. I read a piece, opinion writer for USA Today, I should try to call it up, but I don't want to waste the time. But the man teaches at the War College. That's the War College that trains our military, et cetera, to become officers of integrity and knowledgeable and how to conduct themselves. And so he's coming from a military background if they bring him in to lecture at the War College.
Right.
But he had a scathing commentary on the fact that whether or not Bob Mueller wanted to indict Donald Trump for obstruction of justice, the fact that his people wanted help from our most virulent adversary, the fact that they were playing footsies, and the fact that he never came to call the Russians out for what they had done in an assault on our democracy.
Right.
This man says, this guy as commander-in-chief, whose oath is to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, has failed so drastically that he didn't once use the word impeachment, but what he was pretty much saying was this guy's an abomination and should not be sitting in that office. That was the tenor of his op-ed piece. And he's right. Even if you don't try this guy for obstruction, as obvious as it was, all the things that he's doing right now, this bit about telling Congress, I am not going to respond to any of your subpoenas, this bit about saying none of my people will sit down to talk to you.
Right.
Basically, that was one of the 3 articles of impeachment that they voted for Richard Nixon, because he refused to abide by subpoenas that the House put out for him to give up the tapes. He disregarded the rule of law, and he was in violation of the 3 separation of powers. He was negating Congress's ability to do oversight, the whole bit. So they said, this is an abuse of power. Right. This man needs to be impeached. So never mind what's in the Mueller report, just the way he's acting now is enough grounds for him to be impeached. Now, we can go on and discuss where the Democrats are because they're in this tither.
They're going back and forth between
this
Pelosi
guy
and
needs
Warren
to be impeached one way or the other, whether they do it as just investigatory hearings so that people can see how bad he is, or whether they actually call it impeachment. But yeah, tell us about that brouhaha between Pelosi and the rest of her people.
I mean, the Democrats seem divided between those who want to go ahead with the impeachment and those who feel that any attempt to impeach him will simply harden Trump's supporters even further and may get some of those in the middle to shift over to Trump's side, because there's a certain segment of the country that thinks this is a waste of time. We have Elizabeth Warren vouching for impeachment. We have Nancy Pelosi saying that we need to step back and do a little bit more investigation. So the Democrats don't have it together right now, and the Senate, of course, will never vote for impeachment, thoroughly controlled by the Republicans. There's a debate over whether this is worth it.
No, see, here's the thing. No, you're right on all that. I'm not even trying to argue against that. There are a lot of people across the board. I mean, these are nonpartisan folks, like constitutional lawyers and
think tank heads.
former Elizabeth Holtzman, former congressional member of Congress from New York during the Watergate thing.
Yes.
And she was saying nobody wanted to impeach Richard Nixon. He was a very popular president. He won an amazing landslide victory over George McGovern, or over somebody. I forget who it was. But she said the reason why we held those hearings was because he had violated the law. He had done seriously bad things, and so we needed to hold him accountable, so we had the hearings.
Okay.
After we had the hearings, all of a sudden the American people who saw those hearings day in and day out realized that this guy really wasn't a good guy. So even though they were over here when they started the hearings, When they finished the Watergate hearings,
Okay.
they're over here.
I'm seeing
and
the point.
so what
Okay.
she's saying is the Democrats don't have to jump up and say, let's impeach him. They need to do exactly what Pelosi's saying. I'm not sure I agree with it, but hold these hearings and put the evidence that's buried in the Mueller report. How much time we got?
3 minutes.
Put that evidence out day after day, like they did during Watergate, so the American people can see it. Well, there are other people who say, I agree with that.
Okay.
But other people are saying, because Mueller's report actually said this is the job of the Congress. This is actually the report. This is the job of the Congress. We don't indict sitting presidents. That's part of the preamble to his report. All this, I can't do that, so I'm not going to do that. But it's the Congress's job, and this is where the Congress needs to do their work. Something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. So they can do that. They can do it by jumping into impeachment right away, or they can do what Elijah Cummings, head of the Oversight Committee, is doing. He says, I want all the background evidence.
Right.
I want to put it out there for the public. And he's going to try to do that.
But one thing we can't do is let it go. That's definitely, I mean,
he has got to be held account.
Absolutely.
He's got to be held accountable. And the midterm elections, theoretically, was the electorate saying, we need to check on this crazy man in the White House. That's why the Democrats came into power.
Right.
So the freshmen are saying, yeah, so let's impeach his rear end. And the veterans are saying, no, but let's get him to where the country will want us to impeach him.
Right.
And so they're in this little dilemma, in this dichotomy. But before we dump out in 30 seconds.
And we have a little bit more than that. Have a minute and change.
The way that pisses me off no end, and why I see people want to impeach this guy and all his coterie, is when his, quote, right-hand man, his minister of portfolio for the Mideast, for innovation, for whomever, whatever, Jared Kushner,
Yes.
had the gall to stand up and say before a room full of people that the Russian thing was just a couple of Facebook accounts, no major blip on our democracy. This investigation of the president is a bigger curse or a bigger problem for our democracy than the Russian meddling.
Right.
That's when I want to say, yeah, impeach him and all of them.
Absolutely. Just the level of arrogance
Yeah.
in that statement. And just the little snippet, it's one of those moments when I'm looking at the TV, looking at the image saying, no, you didn't say that, did you? But he did. And that just shows the incredible arrogance and the kind of, basically the attitude that we can get away with it. No.
Oh, yeah, we've gotten away with all this so far, so I can get up here and say stupid crap like that. We got 30 seconds?
30 seconds.
Yeah, so we had some other things we wanted to cover, but the way the news works and the way the segue works, we got what we could in.
Yes.
So this has been Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at MediaWatchEVT.
And we'll catch you the next time, folks.